Okay, so I'm going to take it a step bigger, and I'm the only thing standing between you and Johannesburg traffic, so, enjoy. So my title is False Signals, A Fight for Integrity in Geophysical Methods, and I've got this kind of old school frame around it. I want to point out some of the heroes of this work. Greg Hodges, who's in Canada, he's been a champion of what his first paper was called Voodoo Geophysics. We're not supposed to call it that anymore, but it really is something that has plagued geophysics since the very beginning. And so what we have is something called a technology assessment group. We've put out a flyer about how to evaluate geophysical methods, because really innovation is the mainstay of geophysics. We don't want to crush innovation, but we want to have a framework of how we evaluate a geophysical method. So that's kind of my take-home message. And you'll see there's a whole bunch of other co-authors that are sitting here in the room. Thank you for attending again. And yeah, let's carry on. So the very first paper in the very first issue of the Journal of Geophysics is Black Magic and Geophysical Prospecting. And it's all about bad geophysics. So it was such a problem already in 1936 that the editors of the journal thought it was so important to put this paper first. So it's really a problem. We estimate, or Greg estimated, he's done a lot of the work on this, that 10 to 20 million US dollars per year is spent on voodoo geophysics, which is rarely tendered for. It's usually just, oh yeah, this is a great idea, I'll go do that. And untold more is spent on futile follow-up, and it's a huge reputational damage to geophysics. And I'm going to try not to get sued here today. So I think probably the most famous piece of geophysics, which has already been mentioned, is of course our dowsing rods. And James Randi offered $1 million US prize from 1996 to 2015 to anyone who could do a double-blind study and show that dowsing worked, and nobody claimed the money. Okay, so we'll look at some of the results of some of the dowsing experiments also. But it proved the law of averages works, but quite well, but dowsing actually didn't. So to me, I have arguments with some of my colleagues. There are PhD geologists in my building, or used to be in the building. They've moved on. I didn't mean they died. I mean they. Anyway, I don't want to say too much because you'll figure out who they are. But there are many geologists who are adamant that dowsing works because they've seen it work. They've seen someone go out and douse and, oh my God, they drilled it and there was water, so it must work. And this is the kind of anecdotal evidence we really have to work against. And so when I encounter someone like this, I say, oh, so you also believe in crystal healing? I mean, the crystals are vibrating and my toothache went away. And that is also a very popular opinion on things. So occasionally I get someone thinking about it and saying, yeah, I don't believe in crystal healing because I'm a geologist and I understand crystals. Well, to me, dowsing is like that to a geophysicist. It is being used. This is an article from The Guardian, and it turns out water companies have been using dowsing in the UK in official government-sponsored, tenders, and it's accepted. And so this is arguing against it. You can get the link down there at the bottom, but it really is damaging to geophysics and scientific thought. And we're on that slippery slope, I hate to say, in the US right now. We seem to be heading down a non-scientific pathway, which is a bit disturbing to me. I particularly like this article in New Scientist. So here we have a scientist who's going out, who doesn't believe in dowsing at all, who thinks it's, just such a crock. He's been told to go on this dowsing course and learn how to dowse. And he does. And it works, kind of. Like, he's convinced he's doing it. And the comment he makes at the end here was, why is it so hard to believe the science? And what he says is, what I didn't realize is just how hard it is to believe the science. And he quotes Richard Feynman, who once said that science is a way of trying not to fool yourself. But what he didn't say was just how much fun fooling yourself can be. So if you're wondering what this, whoops, okay. Oh, I got a point here. Sorry, I'm pointing at the screen here. If you're wondering what this kind of random pattern is, that's the results of double-blind studies of dowsing. The dowser doesn't know where the source is, the person who set the survey up doesn't know where the source is, and the dowser puts a pin down where they think the source is. So that's the kind of correlation you get between dowsers. Okay, so how do I make a movie start? I don't know. Well, there we go. So this is not the one that Francois was talking about, but this is sold in Germany. It's advertised as German made. It's very high quality. Let's just play that again. And it is a water finder, and you walk around until this thing starts spinning, and then you drill. And there's another one on the right-hand side, and if we can play that movie, it's the same instrument, and it just kind of twirls around as you walk past a water pipe. Okay, so it's very, very sensitive. So these are being sold like hotcakes. You think our friend is making money? This guy in Germany is making a fortune because they're all going to Saudi Arabia and all over the Middle East. He's absolutely making a fortune. So watch out for these. I've seen them here in South Africa. They're all over the place. Oh, I can just do it with the thing. Surprise. Okay. So this is, of course, patented. So do patents really mean anything? They're not peer-reviewed. Please keep in mind that patents are not peer-reviewed. You can have a patent for a spaceship that doesn't work. Okay? So patents don't necessarily have to work or anything else, okay? So there we go. I'm not sure why this isn't working. That's what I'm pushing. Maybe my battery is running out. Can I have the next slide? Yeah. So let's look at a case that I can talk about because this one has been published repeatedly. This is the Elf Aquitaine gravity oil sniffer. This is the inventor of the gravity oil sniffer. And in 1979, he went to the CEO of Elf Aquitaine, who was not a scientist, who was not an engineer, who had no scientific training, probably a lawyer or something, and convinced him, because he was a good salesman, to buy into this instrument. They spent initially $80 million in 1979 on this gravity wave oil sniffer. Never found anything. Too bad. They spent another $133 million on phase 2 to get the oil sniffer going. But there was a secrecy clause. Nobody could look at the instrument. And finally, the fraud was exposed by Jules Horowitz. $150 million lost in total. Another one is the microlepton technology. I'm not quite sure how the physicists got away with debunking this without any repercussions, but the physicists went in on this one hard, and they took down the microlepton theory. So they were seeking permission to search for oil using microleptons, and the physicists jumped all over them, said there's no such thing. We see this all the time in different kinds of new geophysical methods. There's new particles, new resonances, new frequencies, all kinds of very strange things. So one theory is that a drilling license from the British government could be used as a stamp of approval when marketing the technology elsewhere in the world. And that's how these technologies, they get in on conferences. If they can get a conference abstract published, that's great, because now they're published. Now they try to get into a journal. Okay, they get into a predatory journal. That's okay, they're at least published. And they keep building up case studies. This is also how new technologies come out. So where do we draw the line? How do we figure this out? This is another one. The microlepton scam came out again in another guise. And the editor of Preview, Mike Hatch, or the editor of Environmental Geophysics, was looking for people to, debunk this. Well, we know that this is hard to do because you don't want to put your reputation on the line. So it's a difficult question. So geophysics and exploration thrives on innovation. So how do you distinguish between innovation and scam? We held an event a few years ago, pre-COVID actually, where we actually had students pretending to sell a variety of methods that were probably not real geophysics. And then we went around and we purchased shares in those and whatever. And it was a lot of fun. And I think, it was the first time people had really sat down and thought, is what's out there, how much of that is good and how much isn't? So innovation, new and unusual methods. Passive seismic, when it first came out, was laughed at. Okay, I remember being at the SEG meeting, and there was this company trying to, they had a booth, and people were actually laughing at them. They said, no, they don't have their algorithm. There's no way you can, make coherent signal out of noise. They just laughed at them. DAS has also had some struggle, but both of them are mainstream now. Muon tomography sounds very bizarre, but it actually has sound physics and seems to work. The pyramids, and it's been used in the pyramids and in the mines. The one I kind of look at with a bit of a giggle is ore dogs. Is this legitimate, or is it something we should be really skeptical of? We can't forward model it, so I'm not sure it's really geophysics, but anyways, it's there. So it's something to look at. This was inside the pyramid. You may have heard about the latest pyramid thing with the satellite radar, I think it was, that had, anyways, I was asked to be interviewed on the radio about that, and I declined that one because this whole city that's supposed to be under the pyramids just, anyways, what I've read, this is the new radar technology. They found a hidden city under the pyramids, and most of the radar people I've spoken to are saying this is not a solid method. So something to look at, though. Okay, I'm having trouble again. Maybe it's my hands are cold. Okay, so what are the types of bad geophysics? We have overselling. We've all been there. We've claimed the radar can go down 10 meters, it can only go down 2 meters, sorry, whatever. That's overselling. The method works, but you've oversold it. Or maybe you say gravity can find this cavity, but it's actually too small of a gravity anomaly for the gravity meter to find. There's misguided science, where it's based on bad science or geology, but the seller or contractor honestly believes it works. Okay, and there's a lot of that out there. Blatant scam, or BS, the promoter knows it's not based on science and or knows that it doesn't work and doesn't care. They are scamming you. And when should they realize it just doesn't work? Well, they usually have little clauses that say you can't talk about this. Am I trying to get you, or am I trying to get here? Oh, sorry, there we go. Okay, so types of bad geophysics: geophysics that won't work on your property. Oops, something's wrong here. Geophysics that won't work, and then not geophysics and not science. Okay, it's a slippery slope though. If a new method comes along and it's open to technical review, that's great. Okay, but often what happens is initially it's open to review, then the theory, like Francois was saying, we don't even know the theory of this method that's being promoted. So how do we find out what the math is if we just are barely getting the data out of it now? Okay, so we look at field results, the excuses pile up, et cetera, and finally the promoter knows it's not based on science and knows that it doesn't work, and eventually the community starts rejecting it. Now, there's a couple of methods out there that are very far down this slippery slope, but you really can't talk about them because they're very litigious. So there's a whole whisper network out there of people, if you come to a geophysicist asking for a consultation about a particular method, yes, you can do something like that. But saying it in a public place like this, I would be crazy to do that. Okay, so accuracy in business. So what are some of the red herring or red flags that you want to look at? Perk your ears up when you hear these things. It's able to find a great range of substances. Oh, I can tune it into diamonds. I can tune it into groundwater. I can tune it into coal. Okay, I can tune the instrument to a specific type of thing. It has the direct detection of the substance. It finds the gold, not necessarily the rock the gold is in. It's 95% sensitive. Very low, these are quotes from actual advertisements. Very low power to great depth. When you get a signal that actually the signal increases in resolution as you go deeper, that's probably a physics red flag, okay? That's a very common one. Proprietary means, and especially in the interpretation, gives extraordinary results. So there's no comparable systems. We're interested in partnering with you and having you invest in the thing than in actually doing a survey for you. Not necessarily short-lived. Some of these systems go on and on and on for years. You could ask, why aren't they rich? So the onus is on the promoter to prove it works and explain the theory. Okay? That's on them. And you can see, what a fairly unsuccessful promotion does is not get good results. So one of the things Greg came up with is called the Scamalyzer, where you can evaluate different methods, seeing if, it gets a high score in these different categories. One of the key ones is, for example, marketed directly to media or management. So no relevant technical or publications, and a heavy emphasis on patents. I've got patents, it must be good. Sold as an investment, not a service. Okay, so these are some red flags, and you can read through these later. So there's no simple method to prove or disprove the validity of a geophysical system. We've seen that. It requires careful scientific analysis of the principles, instrumentation, and application, and the theory behind it. So the judgment on the qualities of geophysical system is subjective, and analysis with the spreadsheet is based on the judgment of the individual assigning the values. So even the Scamalyzer is subjective. And of course, Greg assumes no responsibility whatsoever for any result you get using the Scamalyzer. Okay, so this was this little genius event we had. Anglo and De Beers were there, and anyways, we had a lot of fun. And we developed our own kind of evaluation sheet to try to have people just test things out. And the students were doing a great job selling these geophysical methods. I taught one student to dowse, because one of the methods was dowsing, and I think I taught him too well because he was convincing everybody it worked. So that was a bit scary, but everybody invested their little packet of money into the different booths, and then we had the score tallied at the end of the day, and whoever got the same score as the expert was the winner, which really wasn't, who won. The point wasn't who won. It was more about the point of the whole process of how we looked at these different methods. So that was just some scenes from that. And then this is the technology assessment group. There's a number of members beside me in the room, but we don't tend to advertise it too much, simply because the people with the lawsuits are out there. So I've got these flyers if you want one, and yeah, that's the summary.
Thanks very much, Sue. Any last questions? You ask it. Oh, we've also got one.
An anecdote. When I was training to be a technician, one of the chief technicians gave us the course on groundwater, and he said to us, he has been collecting statistics to show that geologists are better than dowsers. And dowsers are successful 49% of the time. Geologists are successful 51% of the time.
Always is.
Yeah, I think this is probably for me my favorite presentation. But I think on a serious note, a lot of times we are approached with technologies or new innovations and so on, but then they always use IP clauses. I think that's the favorite word. How do a person overcome that challenge? And then just in the second part, what I usually do, you guys always see, mostly because I don't do the work myself, but I like pictures and videos because it's except now we probably have to be careful of AI. But what I've realized as well, a lot of people, if they just give me data, it's quite challenging to go through the data and validate it. Where they give me a picture, I can actually see the thing working. It sort of, for me, validates it as well. So maybe just on the IP thing, how do a person overcome on those IP challenges?
The IP is a big issue, and it's one of the reasons many of these methods are out there. So on that side, it helps if you have technical expertise in-house, because that you should have a physicist or a geophysicist or an engineer who can actually take the equipment and tear it apart. If you're not allowed to see the equipment, you're not allowed to work with it, or there's a whole lot of ways to hide it. If the CEO comes in and says, you got to use this because I think it's good because I just got sold the snake oil, you're in a tough position because you got to stand up to your CEO who doesn't want to have egg on his face or her face. So it's really it's a tough one, and I don't know. I get approached quite frequently by people who are bound by are asking advice hypothetically about different methods. That are so what some people do is they come and they say, I found this web page, could you talk to me about that particular method? Okay, because often these things are on a web page, so there is some information out there in the public. Yeah. No, it's an issue.
So on one of these technologies, I won't name that in a public audience like this, but I can point you to a session that was held at the AACG conference in 2015, where an entire session was dedicated to this particular technology. And we had the technology providers come and present. We even had their clients come and present supposedly successful case studies. And then had an audience of subject matter experts and probably a 45-minute Q&A session ensued. This was recorded and put on YouTube, so it is open access. So those sorts of things can be done, and I would encourage the community to be critical in that sense. We as Saga also have a panel of experts that we've appointed, and that crosses a number of different fields. That panel is revised from time to time. But I would encourage the community to also come to the association and put questions to the association. If you come to a Saga conference, it's unlikely that you would see any practitioners present or exhibit that have any pseudoscientific, unsubstantiated technologies.
I hope some of you were interviewed by the students and about what you thought about geophysics, so you can now become TikTok influencers. But I'm told that there's a phrase that's common on TikTok which says, Delulu is the Sululu. And for those and apparently Delulu has just entered the Cambridge English Dictionary, and it just means if you are, the best way to, I suppose, progress in life is being hugely self-confident that things will just come right. So I think maybe if our students have a new geophysics t-shirt, it could be perhaps the slogan could be, Delulu is not the Sululu.
The point about societies is they're not regulating it also. Like, I mean, while I was on the board of SEG, they wouldn't touch us with a barge pole. And same with the American Geophysical Union. They're not interested. Maybe we're small enough to have some influence, but people are not regulating it.
Speaking as a member of Saga, I would say it would be very dangerous for Saga to pronounce upon a private company's techniques that are being used, because the person that the Saga committee could be advising could then go off and then spread the news as to Saga's reaction to that particular technique. And then Saga would face litigation, possibly.
Absolutely. And that's why, this talk is purely about how you, in your own capacity, evaluate the various methods.
Just to mention, though, we had a similar session at GeoCongress with some people in the session using the equipment, and then Francois and Sue's talk. And it was wonderful to see how it became a discussion, that it didn't get heated. Well, it was relatively calm. And then, we could talk about it. So maybe more things like this in a positive discussion sort of way. Okay, any more questions? Are there any questions that anyone has for any speaker today, since we're not really going to have a very long discussion session? Any last questions? Okay. Then just some things to finish off. So thank you, everyone, for coming along. Please give a big round of applause to yourself.